Hello, everyone, and welcome to the March edition of the Product Ops HQ Meetup. For those who don't know me yet, I'm Anna. I'm your community manager here at Product Ops HQ, and I'm also part of the Dragon Boat team, joining you from Portugal. So I'm really excited to be hosting today's session. Again, this is going to be a good one. As we wait for everyone to join us, please feel free to let us know where you're tuning in from in the chat. I will be checking it in just a second. And with me today is Leah. Leah is also from Dragon Boat team, who will be in the chat to assist you with some questions and to share some helpful resources as well. So let's see and wait just a couple of minutes to see everyone joining us. So California, New York, Atlanta, Austin, Texas, Philadelphia, Brazil, Portugal, of course. Joining from Atlanta, that's really nice to see. I always it's always great to see some familiar names here. I'm also seeing some new names. So if this is your first meetup with us, a big welcome to you. Just for context, our community was created to bring together product ops professionals like you, so you can learn, share, and grow together. We also have a Slack group where you can connect with others, ask your questions, and keep the conversation going. So if you haven't joined us yet, please be sure to check it out. I think Leah is going to drop an invitation link in the chat for you to join us. We, of course, wouldn't be here today without the support of our sponsor. Our sponsor is Dragon Boat, which is an AI-powered strategic portfolio management platform designed for everyone in a product operating model, from CPOs to product managers, product ops, and their teams. It helps you set clear strategies, build portfolio roadmaps, and deliver products that delight customers and accelerate business outcomes. Dragon Boat is more than just a platform. They are your partner in achieving product operating excellence, which includes building and sponsoring our amazing community of strategic, product, and ops professionals. So if you like to learn more about Dragon Boat, I encourage you to check out dragonboat.io. Leah just shared that link in the chat. And before we dive into today's topic, I just want to say that today's session is focused on international collaboration and strategic product alignment. We will have a guest speaker sharing practical strategies, and then we jump into a live Q&A. Please drop your questions in the Q&A section as we go. And then if you like to ask your question directly, you can also use the raise hand feature that Zoom has it during the live Q&A. Just a quick final reminder that the session is also being recorded and we will be sharing it after. And with that, I'm going to move forward to introduce you our guest speaker for today. So I'm super excited to introduce you Dave Soetanto, which is a long-time community member. I believe you are one of the pioneers here at Product Ops HQ, right, Dave?
I definitely am.
That's awesome. Thank you for supporting and for being here since the beginning. So for those who don't know Dave, Dave is a product operations leader at Egnyte and also a PMO advisor with more than 16 years of experience in product and program management. He's led a lot of strategic product initiatives in global organizations, such as Pink Identity, Big Commerce, and Byte Squad. He specializes in product operations, roadmap development, scaling agile methodologies to improve collaboration and execution across teams. Its expertise includes technical leadership, metrics and KPIs, and process automation, and is also helping organizations streamline workflows and drive strategic alignment. And that's why we have Dave today to talk about this topic. It also holds multiple certifications, including PMP, CSP, SAF, Responsive PPM, reflecting his commitment to continuous learning and also operational excellence. So Dave, I'm really happy to have you here with us today. Thank you so much. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, next slide, I think. Thank you for everybody for joining. I'm excited for this opportunity to share my experience of something that I'm really passionate about. Before moving to the US, I lived in both the Netherlands and Switzerland, immersing myself in languages and cultures of each. And through that experience, I learned firsthand that cultural differences can either slow us down or become a competitive advantage, depending on how we navigate them. If you ever had to take a meeting at 6 a.m. or 11 p.m. just to accommodate another time zone, you already know that global collaboration is not always seamless. These challenges become even more apparent in software development, where alignment is critical, but not always easy. Two common friction points stand out to me. Finding a solution to a technical problem, where teams from different regions may approach problem solving differently based on their cultural background and technical expertise, and aligning on product priorities for the coming quarter. What the product team generally sees as the highest priority may not match what an engineering team's capacity is or what their current focus is. Without precise alignment, structured workflows, and an understanding of cultural work styles, we risk delays, miscommunication, and duplicated efforts. But when you manage them effectively, global teams can transform from a challenge into a powerful advantage, enabling us to build products faster. Anna, next slide, please. All right. So, building products globally opens up incredible opportunities, giving leadership cost efficiencies and allowing engineering teams to operate nearly 24/7, driving productivity and innovation. But usually these great opportunities come with some interesting challenges. When global teams are managed effectively, they can shift from being a real asset to a frustrating bottleneck, especially when leaders spend their days from meetings from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m., like one of my coworkers, trying to keep everybody aligned across different time zones. For instance, a project manager in the US might need a quick decision from the engineering team, but if the engineers are in Poland or India, usually this means waiting for the next day. One solution we tackled, we fixed or figured out for this was creating a structured asynchronous workflow that allowed teams to move forward without waiting on real-time decisions. And we also built asynchronous leadership structures that ensures that some engineering leadership is available in US time zones, so product managers are not left waiting for blockers to be cleared. Generally, this matters because global collaboration is only as strong as the systems and processes behind it. If we design them well, we maximize efficiency and impact. And if we don't, we risk slowing everything down. Next slide, please. So why standardize? At Egnyte, as we expanded globally with teams in Poland, India, and the US, it became clear that standardizing key processes was crucial to successful international collaboration. Without clear requirements up front, something that should be as straightforward as running a beta program became really complicated. We standardized multiple aspects of our workflows, including product documentation templates, Jira issue management, and KPIs across all teams. For Jira issue management specifically, we focused on the three most common status types. So what's considered planning, what's considered in progress, and what's considered done, which allowed the teams the flexibility to name them whatever they wanted. And using the metadata from those statuses, we were able to build larger reports. Our KPIs were set at the leadership level to ensure that we were all looking at the same high-level targets, and reports were being pulled from a standardized source So we were all talking about the same numbers. One lesson from my experience at Egnyte is to very much avoid rigid frameworks. While we standardize on the most critical aspects of each document, you have to leave room for some local flexibility. It's also easy to neglect to ask for feedback from the engineers that are doing the work, relying on engineering managers to be their representative. I don't suggest you talk to everybody, but you should definitely have one or two people that you can talk to ask for feedback. And real world example that we ended up at that we had at Egnyte before we standardized our beta process. Each product manager managed betas differently. The inconsistency, I can say that word, led to confusion for our customers who would be using a beta feature and assumed that it was live and fully deployed. And sometimes we would have a customer that was not aware that the feature could be turned off at any moment. Without proper communication inside the Egnyte teams, the feature was now assumed to be enabled permanently on their domain and could have been shut off without warning. Introducing a standardized beta brief template clearly defined the roles, responsibilities, and timelines, so when it could be turned off and when we are going to go live with it, reducing customer confusion and internal miscommunication. All right, so scaling product operations is probably one of the hardest things, because we've had talks here before about how there are several people that are a team of one. We have slowly been able to grow product operations as a whole, but scaling product operations across a global team is one of the biggest challenges we face, especially when resources are tight and headcount growth is just not an option. The challenge was that we were growing across the world. We had contacts in the United States, Poland, India, Europe, and as we grew, so did the operational workload, from maintaining alignment across product roadmaps to tracking ongoing initiatives. And instead of simply hiring more people to manage the complexity, we needed to optimize our work and remove unnecessary friction. So one example was that rather than relying on manual updates for status meeting, creating slide decks, we looked for opportunities to streamline and automate repetitive tasks. Now, this might sound familiar, but I feel like, gone a step further, where one of the biggest time sinks that we had was creating roadmap slides. We had, I believe, in total 80 man hours at one point to create and update roadmap slides, and that was for the VP level product managers. At that point, we looked at our processes and said, this is a very expensive roadmap deck. So one of the biggest time sinks was just creating that, maintaining it going forward, and making sure that the status was going to be continuously updated. The biggest issue immediately afterwards was making sure that the product marketing managers also had the opportunity to review that, to ensure that the message from across the product team was consistent. So instead of spending hours compiling, formatting slides, we spent more time upfront defining what a roadmap slide should look like, including what level of detail is required in the description, and pulling that data from our roadmap and tracking tools, which allowed us to generate them whenever needed. So if we had an update that was basically put inside of our system of record, we were allowed to, or we were able to generate a slide deck that would have the latest and greatest information, including the status that the development team was using as well. The information was immediately available as soon as it was done compiling, and it was shared through a leadership channel. By implementing the automation, we've reduced the misalignment, eliminated redundant work, and gave leaders back a lot more time to focus on the more strategic initiatives. Most importantly, this approach helps us scale product operations efficiently, ensuring our processes could grow with the company without requiring additional headcount. Of course, while automation and process improvements help us work smarter, they don't solve everything, especially when it comes to how teams collaborate across different cultures. That's why understanding cultural differences in decision-making and planning is just as important as optimizing workflows, because at the end of the day, processes only work when they align with how people work best. Next slide, please. All right. So at Egnyte, as you can see, we operate across multiple regions. We have product leadership based in the United States and most of our engineering teams in Poland, India. While this setup provides significant advantages, allowing us to scale product development and leverage a nearly continuous development cycle, it also introduces operational and cultural challenges that impact how teams collaborate, make decisions, and execute product strategy. To better understand these dynamics, we can look at Geert Hofstede's cultural dimensions theory, which examines how cultural values shape workplace behavior. His research identifies 6 key dimensions, but today we'll focus on 2 that have a direct impact on how we run product operations at Egnyte. The first is uncertainty avoidance, how different cultures approach risk and planning. The second is power distance, how teams make decisions. Understanding these dimensions helps us adapt processes to different teams rather than assuming a one-size-fits-all approach works globally. The first one we're going to cover is uncertainty avoidance for product roadmap planning. One of Hofstede's key dimensions is uncertainty avoidance. It measures how comfortable a culture is with ambiguity and change. Poland has a high uncertainty avoidance score, meaning Polish teams prefer structured long-term commitments that minimize uncertainty. The United States and India have moderate uncertainty avoidance, which makes them more comfortable with flexibility and adapting plans based on shifting priorities. At Egnyte, this became clear in how different teams approach roadmap planning. Polish teams were excellent at maintaining focus and execution discipline. Once a project was committed to the roadmap, it became the highest priority, ensuring consistency and follow-through without distractions. US and Indian teams brought adaptability and responsiveness, allowing for adjustments when new information or business needs emerge, ensuring we could remain agile in the crazy world that's happening right now. So without a structured process, we risk misalignment. Some teams were looking for commitments, while others wanted flexibility. The solution to this, or rather the balance to this, was to create a structured 2-tiered roadmap strategy. We had 2 levels, an annual strategic themes where leadership defines broad outcome-driven themes, providing a high-level direction without locking teams into very rigid execution plans, and quarterly initiative and feature planning, where leadership selected 10 key initiatives, revisiting the completed initiatives from the last quarter to assess whether we needed to reinforce or pivot to another initiative based on evolving business needs. This framework ensured that teams had clarity on priorities while still allowing for adjustments where needed, combining structure and flexibility. The next dimension we're going to cover is power distance. And this is how teams expect decisions to be made. Another crucial, the United States has low power distance, meaning that teams expect individual ownership and the ability to make independent decisions without constant oversight. Poland and India have high power distance where they expect formal leadership approval before moving forward with major decisions. So I briefly touched on this before, but before we introduce beta briefs, PMs in the United States launch beta features quickly and, well, haphazardly. They assumed any issues could be resolved in the moment if there were any issues. Meanwhile, Polish and Indian teams expected product leadership to sign off on nearly every step, including closing out a beta. This slowed execution, when processes were not clear. So to bridge this gap, we introduced a beta brief template that provided a clear set of questions for the product managers, product marketing team, customer success, a clear set of questions and requirements to think through before launching the actual beta, a standardized process for presenting proposals to leadership in regions where approval was expected, and a single streamlined approval step that reduced unnecessary delays. By implementing the shared framework, we were able to reduce overhead, ensure consistency globally, and align all teams on how decisions should be made, respecting regional expectations while maintaining execution speed. So some key takeaways here: understanding the cultural differences helps us create processes that works across all teams. Balancing structured roadmaps with flexibility ensures smoother collaboration, and tailoring decision-making structures prevents misalignment and bottlenecks. But I suppose one of the most important that you see on this last point here, people are not numbers. Successful product operations must be built around how teams actually work and not just how we expect them to. I had a couple more notes, but at the same time, I believe that this is a great place to wrap it up. But just to close, global collaboration is a challenge. When done right, it's a huge advantage. By combining clear structure, smart automation, and cultural awareness, we turn complexity into an opportunity to build better, faster, and smarter. But with that said, thank you so much for listening to me. Love to hear your thoughts, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks so much, Dave. So I think this was a great start for our discussion now. So I would love to open up the floor for questions. If you haven't already, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A, and we will get to as many as we can. Or if you prefer, and I really encourage you to do it, now is the time to raise your hand, and if you want to ask directly or share your ideas with us. So please just raise your hand through the button that we have here in Zoom, and we will unmute you to join the conversation. So let's give you some time, and let's dive into these questions. So we have one coming in from Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Sarah is asking, do you do any kind of large team structure planning, example, PI planning? And if so, curious how you navigate time zones.
That's a great question. At Egnyte, we do not do PI planning per se. What we do instead is that two-layered approach. We realized very quickly that while big room planning or PI planning was an advantage for teams that were co-located, at a smaller company like Egnyte, and I say smaller comparatively, we are right now 1,200 people with about 300 in the dev organization. The large big room planning was just not feasible from a financial point of view. So we ended up doing that two-tiered approach, making sure that we had the product managers create a connection with the leadership team who provided the KPIs, and then would break down all of those results into specific features. Those would then be swarmed on and scored based on all the different measurement metrics that we have, and prioritized based on that. Since we have that ready, we were able to get all of that information inside of our smaller teams and group it and roll it up into an actual roadmap.
Okay, I hope this answered your question, Sarah. Let's move to the second one. So we have one from Peter. You mentioned OKRs as an instrument to align work. Were cultural difference taken into account in writing these OKRs?
Yes, at a high level, yes. And the best example I can give was how our users would adopt a feature. So one example we had was the way in the United States, large customer of ours wanted to start using the Egnyte web, but culturally they were focused on using desktop app instead. So to make sure that we would drive engagement instead of just hammering down on we'll use the web client, we reoriented the objective to also include desktop app usage numbers.
It's nice. Thank you. Thank you, Dave. So the next one we have in the chat is from Sandra. Sandra asks, did you encounter a time when you were trying to introduce a new process and got major pushback from one of the teams? How did you navigate that?
I mean, yeah, all the time. We get that nearly every time I change anything. The fastest or the simplest way I can explain it is we need to understand what their issue is with whatever the process change is. So a good example is during quarterly planning, we end up with some teams that are not comfortable with committing to something that they may or may not hit. So one example that we had to be flexible about was why. Of course, it's hard to put cultural differences into words, but what we ended up doing instead was allowing them some flexibility and saying this, instead of a hard commit, this is a stretch goal. And we understand that if you were not able to 100% get this, then it's going to be okay. You're not going to be penalized in any way. The flip side to that, of course, is to make sure that you keep them accountable on things that they did commit on, and make sure that you keep tracking exactly what's going on.
Thanks, Dave. So we have a lot of questions coming in, and we also have a raised hand from Jenny. So Jenny, I will go to you next, but first let's go to Connie. Connie asked, you mentioned building slides automatically. How did gather all the details that went into the slide templates, custom code or an integration?
Good question. The first iteration of it was focused on using the corporate template that we already had. So if we had any issues with the, let's call it high level view of what the company had, we would basically just see what does the company do today? What do we do now at Egnyte today? And the next step that we had to take was really define what a perfect slide looked like. Now, of course, we're never going to be able to do that. For the first iteration, we used Jira at the very high level, and were able to use the details at the highest level of that feature. So for us, it was either an epic or an initiative. We marked those through a filter, and based on the filter on the Jira side, as well as the corporate slide template that we got, we were able to generate slides that we had all the details in that we needed. Now, sometimes some things were misaligned, but for the most part, I believe the most important thing is that we had the ability to create those slides quickly and not have any duplication of effort. But at the end of the day, the question I believe was duplicate or custom code, I think. There was some custom code in there. We did, for the most part, put all of that in Jenkins, and allowed anybody who had access, or anybody, to basically make their own filter and generate as many slides as they want. because at the end of the day, we want to enable them.
Perfect. So we have one from Kiran. As the teams are shuffled after every few years, what steps did you take for smooth transition?
Yeah, so it's very brave to assume that we always have a smooth transition. I can already tell you that that's not always the case, but we usually, when we create teams or reorganize teams, the biggest, most difficult part is making sure that they have the skill sets that allows them to do what they need to do. So, pardon me, the most difficult part for us was basically doing the storming phase, getting to that storming phase in Tuckman's model. But we were able to basically get through that by finding what they needed to work on or were going to work on. And as soon as they were, we were able to expose what they wanted to really create. And once the transition to an actual formed team or normed team is there, we're off to the races.
Perfect. Thanks, Dave. So now I will allow Jenny to talk with us. Hi, Jenny. Welcome to the big stage.
Always glad to be on the big stage.
Awesome.
So Dave, one of the things that I've been thinking about as you've been talking about all of this is, right, you're talking about especially the cultural differences between the US and India.
Mhm.
How much did you think of your strategy as trying to make those cultures come closer together versus having the product cultures in these two countries remain distinct and just sort of enabling almost like an API interface between the two different cultures?
So, yeah, that's a great question. I can't say it's going to be either or. The biggest, most important thing to take into account whenever we're going to that, let's call it global direction, is really to find what the most important things are that we had for each of the different levels. So the leadership team in the United States had very specific requirements on what we needed for quarterly planning, for example. Our focus at that point was making sure that the product management team in India also had that knowledge that that is what they needed, and that was non-negotiable. But as soon as we went beyond the most important thing, so the lowest common denominator, the conversation became a lot more simple, and we were able to get to what are the things that allow them to basically be a team and really create their own process. So trying to say this as nice as possible, something I've ended up saying is give them enough process to teach themselves, so that at that point they were able to really create their own process and eventually teach us things that we didn't even think about. And that comes from product ideation all the way down to processes that each different of the different teams use. I hope that answers your question.
I think I was wondering a little bit more about like the overall, like like your strategy and how you were like where, you know, it sounds like there were some ways in which it sounds like it was much more of, hey, India needs to adjust to US ways of working than
I,
US adjusting to, like, there were places where
gotcha.
you said India can still work the way that they want to, but US wasn't changing their culture to accommodate India. It sounded like it was much more the expectation was there were going to be places where India had to change to accommodate the US. Am I reading that correctly, or?
Well, no. We definitely changed on our end as well. one of the, I suppose, biggest changes that we ended up having was we didn't just open an office in, I don't know, Punya and say, that's it, we have our team there. We ended up sponsoring visas, bringing people over here, and they've become citizens to actually become a part of Egnyte to make sure that they can teach us. So we're very much focused on adapting to some of their needs, and that includes having, for me at least, very early meetings, so that way they can still work on their times, and we don't force them to be basically shoehorned into our not just time zone but processes. There are several teams which I am 100% disconnected from, that I'm unable to really talk to simply because of time zones at the end of the day. But I always make the effort to find out what their issues are when it comes to our process. And from a process point of view, the most important thing is making sure that they are able to voice their concerns and how we incorporate it into ours. And like I mentioned earlier, the previous iteration of the roadmap, actually, I'm not sure if I covered this, but the previous iteration of the roadmap planning process was 100% focused on making sure that everybody followed the United States way. One advantage of the automation was being able to standardize for all the different groups. And that allowed us to basically give them the lowest common denominator and focus for them on the different features that go underneath it, while the product manager, who would be our quote unquote liaison in India, would be the one to flesh out the details at that epic level, giving us the value that we were allowed to be able to get the slides and the roadmap commitment for the entire engineering team. As opposed to Poland, where in Poland we ended up having less, and let's call it different issues. They were very focused on every single detail, technical detail, and because of that, we were not always able to come to a commitment at the expected end of the quarter review. So that was a different set of expectations that we had to accommodate and make sure that we started our planning much earlier for the teams that specifically wanted those technical details.
Thank you, Dave. I hope that answered Jenny's question. So let's move on to the next one. So Drew Kerrigan asks, a lot of what you said was awesome and reminds me of Atlassian's Team Anywhere and Async Collaboration learnings. I'm curious, have you followed the work they've been doing there? And if so, what thoughts were valuable or not there?
I have not heard of Team Anywhere and Async Collaboration, and that is definitely something I'm going to be reviewing. Thank you, Drew. I'd love to learn more. I'm always on the lookout for new, interesting materials. So anything that I can really focus on, I'll definitely take a look at.
Perfect. Drew, I don't know if you want to join the live discussion. If you want, you can raise your hand and share your ideas and also share with us a little bit more about this. If not, we can chat in Slack later. Okay, so next one is from May. Hi, May. Nice to have you here. So are your teams employees or contractors? If you've experienced both, have you seen a difference in how these differences are handled?
We, for the most part, have everybody as an employee. We don't have a lot of contractors. Out of the 300 people number I mentioned earlier, I believe we have, I think, less than 50 Generally, because we have such a high ratio of employee to contractor, we end up not really noticing that, at least from my point of view, we end up not noticing that they are contractors. And most of the time, the difference is more seen, I guess, tenure. So if somebody has been at Egnyte in particular longer, I'm very interested in seeing what they have observed over the course of the process evolution versus somebody who's newer who might have seen something much more efficient at a different company. Somebody that's in particularly talking about now is our new Chief Product Officer, Prasad Gunya. And he's amazing, but a lot of his experience is also focused on B2C. So we are a B2B company at Egnyte, and that gives us some different problems when it comes to process organization.
Awesome. That's a challenge when a new CPO comes in, right?
Oh, yeah.
All right, so let's go to the next one, which I think, can we get the transcript of the call? Yes, the call will be recorded. It's being recorded, and we will send you the recording and the transcript after. What else? We have some in the chat as well. Are designers embedded in local teams? If not, any tips on how design, engineering, PMs can collaborate globally and async?
Good question. I actually had a conversation with the design lead this week. We don't have them located in the same physical location, but that's mainly because we are like a global company. So the more focus is time zone overlap. We made sure that when we are going through our planning for the coming quarter, we had product and product engineering and design in the same time zone. So when it came time for them to reorganize for the coming quarter, they could review everything that was in or out of the quarter, and specifically for designers to be able to work ahead of schedule. So that way they were able to, for the most part, review everything that was going to come through and reduce the amount of rework. This also allowed us to work at a much leaner group size for the designers. So, it's a bit of a give and take.
Awesome, thank you. So Rachel is asking, how do you ensure that strategic focus isn't lost when you engage product marketing later in the process?
So strategic focus is really defined at that higher executive level. And when I mentioned that we were talking about the KPIs and making sure that we had those organized at that exec level, we also wanted to make sure that there was a story behind it. So when it comes to any kind of like slide, you'll see just KPI, but we also have a system of record where anybody can go in and read the brief of what the product manager or the chief product exec wrote about it and how we are not there yet and why we need to get there for the next stage for a company. Generally, that's always linked inside of the roadmap slides and always presented at every single SKO.
I hope that answers your question, Rachel. And thank you, Drew, for sharing your Atlassian resources. I also heard about some GitHub documentation about async work. So that's also a good resource for teams who are working globally, right? At least for me, it's helpful because I also work with the US team on the European side. So yeah. All right, so let's see if we have any additional questions, or if someone wants to jump into the big stage. Now it's the time before we wrap up.
I'm reading a question here by Drew. I think whether remote teams or satellite offices of the main company, or talking about contracted work from third-party resources. Did I answer that?
Of course.
All right.
And I'm sorry I missed that.
Yeah, no, so they are satellite offices that are 100% employees, and the remote teams are not any less employees or viewed as any less employees than any other ones. We are very much a global company, and we do have leadership in all of the different offices. So in the United States, I believe we have 4 or 3 offices. The satellite offices are mainly focused on sales. So as long as we focus on or organize ourselves to make sure that they're aware this is what they do, then everybody's still very much in the same information network. When we're talking about the larger group in India in particular, I have a easier time to plan with them personally, simply because of that API contract, so to say. We want to make sure we have like all of the things in the right systems of record, and I can always rely on all of my product managers to make sure that everything is in that format, where whatever it is and wherever it is.
All right, so thanks a lot. I think that's all the questions we have, and I think we are almost on time to wrap it up. So let me reshare my slide deck. So thank you all so much for your great questions, and thank you again, Dave, for your insights during this live Q&A. Before we wrap up today's session, I really want to share some helpful resources. So the Culture Factor tool that Dave showed us is here for you to check. Leah is dropping the link in the chat. Also, don't forget to connect with Dave if you want to continue the conversation with him. And finally, I want to invite you all for an Ask Me Anything session that we will be hosting with our sponsor, Dragonboat. This session will be featuring Aaron Hall, who's the VP of Portfolio Management at Carfax. Both Aaron and Dragonboat's founder, Becky Flint, will be talking about how to accelerate strategic impact at scale on March 26th. So if you want to join us, please scan the QR code in the screen or check the link that Leah also dropped in the chat. Feel free to register. I think it's going to be a great session as well to learn more about portfolio management. And if you want, you can also invite your teams to join us. So last but not the least, please feel free to join us in Slack to continue this conversation. This doesn't need to end up here, right? So I think that's all for today. Thank you again to Dave for sharing your real life experience, which I think it was super helpful. And a big thank you to all of you for joining us. So I look forward to seeing you all next time. Have a great day, and thanks again for being part of today's session. Bye-bye.